Today we're going to define briefly what is pendulation and titration for trauma treatment. And in my own experience, after I survived a sexual assault and domestic abuse, I saw a somatic therapist. And at the time, I wasn't familiar with what she was doing, although I cooperated with it. And now I will share with you how she worked with me and how trauma therapists are best able to work with survivors of trauma. And so these two words are very, very important, and you'll notice in your own life how they come up. So number one is titration. Titration is the ability to live with our trauma, the ability to live with our past, especially as we go about our lives. So as triggers come up, we might feel an increased heart rate, or we stop breathing, or we have tunnel vision, and we go into this fight, flight, freeze, overwhelm mode. So titration is how a therapist will say, can you sit with 1% of your discomfort? And you'll say, okay, I can only sit with 1% of this discomfort. And that means I can notice my high heart rate when I think about what happened to me, and I can notice how my breathing becomes more shallow. Okay, so that would be an example of noticing how your body can slowly sit with the discomfort of triggers and flashbacks and the trauma response. And that's titration. And then pendulation is a very important aspect of this, because then the trauma therapist will say, okay, now that you have sat for just a few moments with that trauma response, and only 1% of it, okay, we will help your body shift out of that trauma response and into a response that feels a little bit more neutral, a little bit safer. If your body can feel safe, then even into safety. So it depends on what your nervous system can do at that point. And the pendulation is moving out of noticing all of those trauma responses within your body into the safer space. And the safer space will say, okay, can you notice the window next to you? Can you notice the sunlight? Can you notice the ground supporting your feet? And this will help your body physiologically to shift out of the trigger, the flashback, the sense of unsafety, the sense of overwhelm, the fight, flight, freeze response. And when you slowly start to feel, even for a few moments, a little bit safer, a little bit more present and in the moment, that is how you have taught your body just one time how to go from the trigger, the flashback, whatever it is, the discomfort of trauma, into a safer, more neutral space. And that is very important, because as we go about our lives and our days and we have triggers and flashbacks, our body physiologically needs to learn, this is what it feels like when I feel triggered and unsafe, but this is what it feels like when I can come out of that into more safety and out of that survival response. And that pendulation means your body is developing the capacity to stop living in the flashback and in the trigger, and can more and more flexibly and more easily live in the present moment in a safer space. Maybe a safe space, maybe a safer space, maybe a neutral space, but definitely out of that trigger overwhelm space. So here we have the titration of learning to sit with the pain and the grief and the loss and the trauma, and the pendulation helping our bodies learn how to come out of that space and into a safer or more neutral space more flexibly from one to the other, back and forth. I hope that you've learned something today with trauma therapy, with titration and pendulation. Sending big hugs, lots of love. And I see that we have a few comments. And the comment here we have is, let's see. Okay, I forgot about fawning. Thank you. The fawn response is a very important response. And thank you for mentioning that. You guys have a good day.